I know you don't feel comfortable driving your classic car at night, and I've got some solutions. Your old style glass sealed beam headlights are not very bright, and especially if they're as old as your car, they're really bad. When you look at classic cars, there's a few things that you need to think about when upgrading your headlights, because this in front of me is a representation of what's available to you to buy to replace your old style headlights. A lot of people want better, brighter headlights on their classic car or truck because they want to be able to drive them at night. But there's some really important things that you need to know about before picking one of these models. Number one, they have to fit. Did you know that classic cars and trucks have really narrow headlight mounting buckets? And a lot of aftermarket headlights just don't fit. And you have to worry about style. Do you want something that looks like a modern projector, or this LED array, or something in between? Most classic car collectors want their headlights to remain stock looking just like everything else. So then we look at some options like these ones. For example, in the studio today we have this super cool replica 1929 Mercedes-Benz SSK. Back in the 20s, these things had a supercharged V6 making 300 horsepower, and they were built by Ferdinand Porsche. I love seeing something like this that gives a good feel of what these cars used to be like back in the day. And I understand why it's important to have the right headlights on a car like this. And the last thing that's really important is the actual performance. Believe it or not, these different headlights all perform differently. When we measure performance of a headlight, we're looking at beam pattern shape. Where is the light distributed? How wide is it? How tall is it? We're looking at beam pattern color. Is it more of an old style? Is it a modern bluish cool white style? Is it yellow? And we're looking at fitment. Do the lights even fit in the vehicle in the first place? First, let's talk about the cheapest options, the generic LED headlights that we find on Amazon, and we'll go from there. If you hop on Amazon or eBay or any number of different resellers, you're gonna find something like this. These types of LED headlights are running rampant. Let me tell you right now, they're really, really bad. I've seen them come in as low as 30 bucks a piece, and you get $30 a piece performance. There's some headlights that are 300, 400, 500 bucks a piece, and I'm telling you, you don't have to go quite that high if you don't want to spend the money, but please stay away from something like this. For comparison, we're going to show you the stock halogen headlights that came in on this Gazelle. Now keep in mind, these are brand new sealed beam GE headlights. If you have headlights that you've put 10,000 miles on them, or they're a decade, 2 decades, or 3 decades old or more, you're going to get significantly less light output than this. This is a perfect test because it shows you the best case scenario if you're running stock halogen headlights. Chances are yours are even less bright than this. In our test, there was only one aftermarket headlight that came in brighter than this headlight. This stock headlight came in at 820 maximum lux. That's really impressive, but you can see why. All of the light is concentrated to the middle. It's like a spotlight. I don't know about you, but when I'm driving my car or truck at night, I need to see side to side just as much as I need to see downrange. There's a reason people are scared to drive their classic cars and trucks with these headlights, because it gives you tunnel vision. Remember, brightness isn't all that matters here. We're looking for the total package. When we flip it to high beam, these things make 1,680 maximum lux, but the whole thing just gets brighter. You're not gaining any more visibility anywhere, up, down, left or right. It's just that same weird cross beam pattern. So now let's compare it to our first competitor. This headlight goes by many names. Quake LED sells this product. About 50 different companies on Amazon sell this product, and they're all equally this bad. This thing only came in at 140 maximum lux. The stock headlight is 7 times brighter than this. If this is that much worse, why would you spend even $30 on it? Total waste of money, and definitely a downgrade from what you're driving with today. Not only is it super dim, look at this beam pattern. There's no discernible hot spot, and the whole thing is stretched out from floor to ceiling, giving you the weirdest beam pattern you'll ever drive with. This will be a downgrade in nighttime driving experience. When we go to high beam, it gets a little better, but still only 660 maximum lux. This is still one of the worst headlights we tested, and on your classic car, it's gonna look downright weird. That headlight was the worst option available to you. Now let's talk about probably the best. Everybody knows Holley as a leader in ignition systems, intake manifolds, carburetors, exhaust systems, and more. They're all about that classic car life. And they know that these stock headlights are a big problem, so they teamed up with Morimoto and created a classic car and truck specific headlight. This is called the Holley RetroBright, and they really took a lot of time to think about what would be the best classic headlight in the world. They have period correct styling, fitment for any vehicle. They come in the different shapes and sizes, like the rectangular headlights and the round headlights, and they're way brighter than pretty much every other option out there for a classic car. Sure, there's other options that are brighter, made for motorcycles and Jeeps and other modern vehicles, but in terms of classic car styling, the Holley RetroBright is probably your best bet. Also, it's important to note they come in 3 different colors. For you Euro fans with Volkswagens, BMWs, and Audis, you got a yellow style if you want that look on your car or truck. And for everybody else, you have a more traditional style in a clear lens, but even that comes in 2 different color options. You've got the period correct looking classic white, a 3000K light output that perfectly matches the color of your stock steel beam halogen headlight, and you have a 5700K. That's a more modern white, more cool white to update the look of your vehicle without really changing the style. Which one of those 3 colors perform the best? Let's find out right now. Here's the yellow version in that Euro style from the RetroBright. This thing comes in at 620 maximum lux, which is not as bright as the peak intensity of your stock halogen sealed beam, but the distribution of light is arguably better, and you get that cool yellow look. When we turn this thing to high beam, you get 920 maximum lux. That's a 30% increase in brightness over your low beam. But how does that compare to the white version of the Holley RetroBright? First, let's look at the classic white version. The color on this headlight is called 3000K, and you can see that it almost perfectly matches the color of your stock steel beam. This gives your classic car or truck a period correct look, and most people can't tell the difference between this LED headlight and your steel beam halogen. This one's brighter than the yellow version, coming in at 680 maximum lux on low beam, and when we flip it to high beam, we see an increase of brightness to 1030 maximum lux. But the real hero of the Holley RetroBright product lineup is the modern white. The name of this color, they call it 5700K, and it comes in at 870 maximum lux on low beam. This is officially the brightest low beam headlight in the lineup, and it's the only headlight of everything we're showing you today that's actually brighter than your stock halogen headlights. Everything else is technically a downgrade in terms of peak performance, but arguably an upgrade in beam pattern distribution. The Holley RetroBright modern white color in 5700K, though, has it all. The beam pattern is wider, so you can see farther off to the sides of the road. The beam pattern max intensity is brighter, so you can see farther down the road. And all the light is arguably placed exactly where you need it. Even though those stock halogen sealed beam headlights are brighter than most of what we're testing, the aftermarket options are actually an upgrade. Because I don't really care if you have a super bright pencil beam in the middle of your beam pattern if you can't see the things you need to see. What use is seeing half a mile down the road when you can't see the deer in the ditch? The Holley RetroBright in the modern white color solves all your problems. It looks good on your classic, it's brighter than stock, and the beam pattern is phenomenal. I guarantee the Holley RetroBright LED headlights will give you the confidence you need to drive your beloved classic at night again. Next, let's look at a high-quality LED replacement from a company called JW Speaker. This American company has been a leader in automotive lighting for a very long time, and this is their classic headlight. This is the JW Speaker 8700 Evo 2 Classic. It's actually the exact same thing as their Harley and Jeep 8700 headlight, but it has this fluting on the inside of the bezel to give it a more classic style. Really what's happening is you have 2 very large round projectors on the top and bottom, and then you have 2 smaller D-shaped projectors on each side. And the combination of all of those 6 projectors creates your beam pattern. So how does it perform? Pretty good. Let me show you. When we fire this thing up, the first thing you're going to notice is the beam pattern. It's completely different than your stock halogen headlight. This razor sharp cutoff line with a little uptick in the middle where the square shaped super bright hotspot is how it's supposed to be when you look at a modern headlight. A lot of people love this and a lot of people don't. It's really a love it or hate it kind of a situation. In my opinion, it's a pretty good beam pattern and it's going to illuminate the road in front of you very well. So the biggest thing to consider here is, do you like the way it looks installed on your car? Because the low beam comes in at 610 maximum lux. Again, not as bright as the sealed beam, but if you have very old sealed beams, it's probably twice as bright. And my favorite part about this headlight is when you turn it to high beam, boom, look at that tons of light up above the cutoff line. This thing's like having an off-road light equipped to your car or truck without having to add anything extra. It's built into your headlights. The brightness here is 1140 maximum lux. The next one was brought to our attention by a viewer. They said, that's cool, but how does it compare to the headlights from VintageCarLEDs.com? Well, that's what we have here. Now, the first thing I noticed is that this looks like an AutoPal headlight. That's a company from India that has this trademark bronze metal look. So I'm familiar with AutoPal, and they make a pretty good beam pattern, but it's very outdated, and you're going to see in just a minute that the beam pattern is not as good as others. The other thing I noticed is that it has an E mark on the lens. That's for European standards. This is not a DOT compliant headlight. It is not a purpose-built assembly where the light source and the optics are married together like other ones. This is literally an off-the-shelf H4 LED headlight bulb. These are not DOT compliant. When you put an LED headlight bulb into a reflector headlight housing designed for halogen bulbs, it's not going to work how it should, because the way these LED chips are positioned inside the headlight is different than the halogen light bulb this assembly was made for. We talk about this a lot with LED headlight bulbs. If you want to learn more about why this isn't the best scenario, go check out our other videos where we actually show you how a different LED headlight bulb produces a different beam in the same headlight. We're going to let this headlight speak for itself, install the bulb, fire it up, and see how good it is compared to the stock halogen headlight. Considering that these are $300 to $400, I was expecting a little bit better performance. On low beam, you get 280 maximum lux, which is significantly less bright than this car's original sealed beam headlights, and it's probably about on par with most, considering that over time they lose power. But even if this headlight from VintageLEDs.com was brighter, this is what I'm talking about. The beam pattern is ridiculous. The beam pattern shape of your headlight is a scientifically designed instrument to illuminate specific parts of the road. This thing doesn't do it. It's really not even any wider than your stock sealed beam headlight. What's the point other than going to LED for the sake of LED? There are better options than this. The high beam, however, is pretty darn impressive. Coming in at 1440 maximum lux, this is the brightest aftermarket high beam we saw. So even though this thing has a super bright high beam, it's not even a good high beam. This beam pattern is normal when you put a random LED headlight bulb into a random halogen reflector housing. Even if you like this high beam, the low beam isn't going to cut it. After all, you spend the majority of your time driving in low beam. This is far from the best option for your beloved classic. All we have left to do is talk about this company, Dapper Lighting. These guys have been around for a long time. It's a cool company. They make their own parts. It's not all just off the shelf like some of the products out there. And we were able to get our hands on the V1 and the V2. Dapper has several different headlight options out there, but sometimes they're hard to get a hold of. So I was able to get these two that should give you a pretty good idea of what to expect from the entire lineup. The V1 has an older tech projector. It looks like something that I saw being used about 10 years ago, but it still works. The headlight housing is smaller, so it's going to fit in more applications. But number two, a smaller projector means a smaller beam pattern, and that's not really good. The V2, on the other hand, has a more modern, larger projector that gives you a bigger beam pattern. I haven't tested these yet, but I expect good things out of the V2. But that also means it's a larger housing, and it may or may not fit in your classic car. For example, the V1 versus the V2, you can see a very clear difference, not only width of the reflector bowl, but also depth. The V2 is significantly deeper than the V1, and that's a problem with some classic cars because the buckets are really small. You could put this in a Harley or a modern Jeep without a problem because those housings are huge. But what we've seen is these classic cars, generally speaking, have really, really narrow buckets and can't fit anything any taller or wider than the stock halogen headlights. For comparison, here's another aftermarket headlight that's really, really deep. Look at how huge this thing is. If you were trying to install this where your factory headlight is, it's not going to work. It's huge compared to your stock headlight. So that's a common thing that you need to look out for. If you look at pictures of the headlight you're choosing and it looks really huge, like this or like this, there's a really good chance they're not going to fit your install. That's a really good reason why we recommend the headlights we do for classic cars and trucks, because some of them are made to fit shallow applications like your classic and some are not. First, let's fire up the V1 projector headlight from Dapper. At first glance, the beam pattern is just fine. It looks like a modern, useful beam pattern, but when we test the brightness, It only comes in at 220 maximum lux. That's not very bright at all. This is one of the least bright headlights that we tested in the entire lineup. Dapper did a good job at making a modern looking headlight that will fit in with your period correct classic car, but I definitely wouldn't say it's an upgrade in driving experience considering how dim it is. You could put an HID bulb or an LED bulb in this headlight, but that wouldn't be DOT compliant, and it's only going to make a marginal difference because the headlight bulb itself is very small. Even aftermarket light sources like LED or HID bulbs aren't going to produce enough light to make a meaningful difference. Now when we flip this thing to high beam, something funny happened. It actually lost 20 lux. That means it got less bright on high beam. The beam pattern of the high beam is great, but it's not very bright. What I think is happening is when the internal shutter opens up and allows all the light to come through that projector, you're missing some of the compounding reflections inside the projector that made the low beam brighter. Regardless, it's a cool headlight, but if you're actually looking to be able to see better at night, this isn't the right model. Now let's move on to the Dapper Lighting V2. This model shares a lot of beam pattern similarities to the V1, but it's a better beam because it's wider and it's brighter, but still not nearly as bright as a lot of options we tested. Coming in at 370 maximum lux, this headlight makes a great looking beam pattern that hits all the marks how they should. I just wish it was brighter. When we hit high beam, it opens up the projector, gives you all the light with this really cool high beam pattern, but again, 400 maximum lux. It's just not a super bright headlight. Now that we're done with all that testing, one thing is very obvious. Most aftermarket headlights aren't very good, and I stand with my opinion that the Holley RetroBright is the best option for any classic car or truck. The fact that they retain the factory period correct style with the look of the lens, the color of the beam pattern, and they have the right shape to fit inside any classic car or truck bucket makes them the perfect choice. And the 5700K modern white color is brighter than everything else that we tested for classic applications. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer. Hopefully I helped you understand your options so you can make a smart decision on your next lighting upgrade. And the cool thing about the Headlight Revolution website is you can put in your year, make, and model even for classic cars and trucks, and we'll show you exactly which headlight you need. There's no guessing, or you can talk to our knowledgeable customer service staff at any time. If you have any questions about what would be best for your car, please reach out. We're here for you.